We can build systems better from distributed up rather than top-down monopolies. We are just starting our pre-sales on what we call our Zombie Apocalypse Readiness Kit. So if you would like to run a 5G network yourself, it's going to be as simple as buying one of these kits, dropping that on the side of your garage or your house, and being able to then run your own kind of home 5G network. Just this idea of that you can set up sovereign comms pretty much anywhere, I think is key.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Unleashing DePIN Podcast. My name is Tyler. I am your host, and I'm very excited for our next guest who we get to have on the podcast. We have Deborah from Althea. Deborah, welcome on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to share what we've been working on with Althea.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you. You are a OG DePINner, I guess it's fair to say. You've been in the space for some time, been building through multiple bears, multiple bulls. So I'm excited to get a chance to chat, learn more about what you're doing. I think what you're building is very important. I think I've shared some anecdotes of personal stories where I'm like, gosh, we just need Althea here and it would solve all these problems. So maybe before we jump in, give the folks a quick introduction about who you are, maybe how you got into the space, how you found yourself building at Althea, and then we can kick it off from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Debra Sampir, and I'm the CEO of a company called Hawk Networks that launched in 2017. So it's been about actually this time and around Christmas time in 20. And with the idea of building better systems of utility and primarily telecom, and that is where we built the Althea protocol, which we'll dive more into together with my two co-founders, Justin Kilpatrick and Jahan Chunbeck. And Justin, of course, says, stay the course with us. But yeah, so really exciting things. And I got started with blockchain, actually distributed systems. I love to tell the story of folding at home is actually where I first got excited about doing coordinated work. And that's where everyone contribute compute resources to support folding proteins for scientists. And then mined Bitcoin on a GPU. And I've always been a telecom enthusiast and brought those things together with the launch of Althea in 2017.
That's awesome. I always appreciate when folks have been participating in, whether it was decentralized ledgers or technology just as a category before they dive in. Sounds like there might have been an intersection with this DeSci category that's popping off these days. I know in addition to being in the blockchain or distributed system space, as you mentioned, your telecom background, one of the funny things was we actually had Jeff Pulver, for folks who've been watching the pod for a while. He was on earlier this year. And so you and I initially met last year at ETH Denver at one of the satellite events he did. And you guys were geeking out about your ham radio operator stuff. I told you, I was like, I got to sneak that in at some point. So you've been kind of playing with all of these technologies in a lot of different capacities. Where was the first genesis of we can leverage Web3 or we can leverage blockchain to solve a lot of these problems around telecom specifically? What was the initial inkling of the idea that you wanted to go out and build the Althea protocol from?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was around, and the impetus for me personally was around freedom of the internet, and also building local kind of sovereign infrastructure. So there's I live in a rural area. My ham radio background, I'm a third generation ham radio operator, really believing in that sovereign and resilient infrastructure system that we can build systems better from distributed up rather than top down monopolies. And so we had been, in 2015, there was actually this rise of kind of a meshnet movement that kind of came along with a lot of talking about freedom of the internet, this core freedoms of speech and association and all the things that we hold dear here. And we had started tinkering around with building networks and protocols. And that's actually where I met the co-founders, and probably around that kind of same time frame as that migrated to how do we then take and make these actual systems, right? It's great to make a network with 10, 20 people. But then how do we actually make this into something scalable that can actually disrupt these really brittle legacy systems that really, and then 2020, of course, brought that to a head where it became much more apparent how brittle things are. And I think even today, we're dealing with a lot of that same infrastructure breakdown as capacity increases.
Yeah. And so the initial development work behind Althea, you started as an L1 in Cosmos, if I'm not mistaken, and you've built some kind of infrastructure around bridging to other protocols. Can you just give like a top-down explanation of Althea protocol specifically and kind of what that entails, how that's progressed since your initial development days, and where the protocol stands today?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit of a story. It's giving me a little bit of time to work through the context here. But essentially what we realized is the way that billing happens in the internet today, where it's this odd kind of rental system for access, doesn't actually work. And where we found inspiration was at the core of the internet and the internet exchange. As carriers charge each other, bandwidth becomes a commodity, and there's a lot more programmability and flexibility. So Althea really sought to bring that same kind of market dynamics all the way down to the edge, to the way that we interact with the billing protocols and stuff like that in our phones and in our daily lives. So at the core of what Althea is a routing and communication protocol between machines. It's a price-aware, it's the world's first price-aware multi-hop billing protocol, meaning that you get to choose your choice of cost or latency, which is like your kind of performance metric, on a minute-by-minute basis. And then the routing protocol routes your packets through the internet and then has a multi-hop paying microtransactions between different participants in the network. It's now evolved also to include a tokenized asset platform as well. So you can tokenize the revenue streams of that money moving around the network, kind of a full end-to-end protocol. So we started actually thinking about deploying this system on Ethereum, and we did. We're looking at payment channels and how we do that. Of course, Ethereum is made for financial transactions, and the sort of requirements of a utility-based protocol are not the same. So we evolved then to direct billing on the Gnosis chain. And for many years, of course, we were the highest volume on the Gnosis chain year over year. We made DePIN before DePIN was a thing. And then we started in 2020 really looking at building on using the Cosmos SDK for instant finality, for some of the IDC bridging, a lot of the capabilities we were looking for. And then, of course, EVM, Cosmos was getting hybrid in that same period of time. Had to build a bridge. We built the Gravity Bridge, which is now, it's done about $1.5 billion over the last 3 years. It's the only decentralized Ethereum to Cosmos bridge. It still exists today and is kicking along, running well. And then we started working on, okay, let's bring the Althea L1 to life, which thanks to an amazing group of about 50 validators, the Althea L1 launched and is now in its integration phase on using the Cosmos SDK hybrid EVM stack.
Very cool. And what does it mean for folks that are coming up to speed with, if you will, with kind of the integration phase of the protocol? Can you just unpack that for us?
Yeah, so it basically means we're in kind of the build phase. So the chain is live and it's operated by a decentralized group of validators. However, the token isn't trading, and there's a build in progress with some of the development teams called the DePIN DEX, and that allows for that end-to-end. Different protocols can create speculative types of tokens, or you can use different types of tokens that then transfer to USDC, which is the medium of exchange across the Althea protocol. So really, that's just these kind of last integrations that make the full protocol work end-to-end that we're currently in finishing up. So it's going to be an exciting 2025.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it. And then is there actual revenue flowing through the protocol today?
Yeah, absolutely. Our protocol revenue on the Gnosis chain, it of course is transparent, and it's similar to what like an Akash protocol revenue is doing. So it's usually in about the top 10 of demand side revenue in DePIN. And of course, that's been increasing year over year. And the revenue for year to date was 40% over prior year, at least around July. So we're just finishing up our year-end numbers right now.
Very cool. Who are the participants that are paying on the demand side? Are these telcos, are they ISPs, WISP? Can you just share the different folks within the economy, who they are?
Yeah, absolutely. So Althea is a protocol for use by telecom or ISP type of operators right now. So people that are building broadband networks, whether there's some stories about TreeLink, there's a network up in North Carolina, and of course Hawk Networks has a lot of networks as well. So these are ISP type networks like you would think of Comcast or Verizon that are utilizing this protocol to do pay-as-you-go and prepaid type systems. And what's exciting is with our work that we've recently been announcing in 5G, our partnership, Hawk's partnership with Globalstar, we're really bringing that same capacity to mobile networks as well. And you'll see more of that in 2025. So we're pretty excited about that. But right now, people that are using it for their broadband networks in their homes.
Very cool. With Hawk's Network, are you specifically helping go out and set up some of these last mile internet connectivity services for different customers, whether that be businesses or consumer? Can you just share how that sort of fits into the broader picture of Althea?
Yeah, and I think it's really important, especially from a Web3 perspective. I think that many DePIN protocols have said throughout the protocol, and if we have this code, then networks will just form. And that's really not how infrastructure is managed. There's a management component to infrastructure, right? If someone's running an aqueduct, somebody has to make sure somebody's going along and testing the water quality. And so Althea at Hawk, we've always realized that there needs to be a network management system, that there needs to be ways that operators can utilize this protocol to actually manage networks with humans that are using it in businesses and enterprises and so forth. We build technology like the 4G, 5G core that we call Althea core. We build the network management system. So operators of all sizes, whether they're the largest manufacturing and EV companies or they're smaller, just small ISPs, can actually manage and curate their infrastructure. So that's a big component of it. Now, of course, what's really great about the Althea protocol itself, the billing protocol, is there's a time-based payment that you can use for operators and service, and there's a machine-to-machine based payment that you can use for basically anything from vending machines to your broadband network as well.
That's really exciting. I think that's a pragmatic way of going about building out both the kind of revenue demand side, and then I'm sure it gets to stress test the protocol in real time, which is always a great thing. For people that are maybe familiar with different wireless initiatives within DePIN, call it DY if you will, maybe they're familiar with Helium or familiar with XNet, can you help share where Althea fits into that category of decentralized wireless, maybe some of the differentiators that exist, just for folks that are kind of trying to understand the space a little bit better?
Sure, yeah. So I think that typically most DePIN protocols look at, okay, how can we build infrastructure by incentivizing people to run infrastructure at their house, right? And they incentivize them with a speculative token, right? So you put a box, you put some equipment on your house or whatever, and you earn a speculative revenue. And Althea instead looks at how do we coordinate these machine-to-machine types of networks, whether it's a utility for energy or it's for telecom where we primarily are, and we're moving microtransactions of USDC around. So what you'll find is two different ways. You'll, with a DePIN protocol that's paying people to build infrastructure, there isn't necessarily a customer on the other side of it. There's not necessarily a need to put that box on that shelf, to put that antenna on your house. And so you end up building a lot of very inefficiently, right? So you might build quick, but it may be inefficient. Whereas Althea's growth method is very directed toward customers. You have to have someone on the other side of that is willing to pay, and it's going to be the demand side. So you'll have you may have what appears to be a slower growth, but it is growth that's directed toward actual revenue and consumer-based applications. And what I also think is really interesting is Althea's really found a lot of traction with the enterprise sector. So we had an EV company that's working with us that had said, look, we're going to spend about $4 billion over the next 10 years in building in public connectivity costs. What if we build our own private network? And so I think when we think about offloading and interconnecting with public cellular networks or even on the Wi-Fi side, we see a lot of that vision and traction from the enterprise side. So you might see a Starbucks net or a Walmart net or whatever is utilizing these protocols to offset their costs. And of course, we think also eSIM 5G. So we spent a ton of time building in 4G, 5G cores. Now the spectrum access with Globalstar is a huge unlock. And so that machines and devices and phones that are connecting with eSIM can run seamlessly between this kind of single, homogeneous sort of connectivity layer.
Very cool. Yeah, that's incredible. So for folks that are within, maybe use the example like Walmart Net or Starbucks Net, they'd be able to effectively hop between these various networks, if you will, once they're connected to Althea. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's much easier to participate in part of a homogeneous network. And you'd be able to either identify and predict where market movements might happen and where building would be more efficient because you have a lot of data on chain as well. And this is where liquid infrastructure comes in as well. So we tokenize a telecom asset like a radio tower or a network with fiber optic, and then fractionalize that, opens participation into different ways of funding and building and coordinating the actual infrastructure build out. So you have both sides of that too, but it is very demand focused where you're going to be building where that greater revenue is going to come from.
Yeah. And so with the liquid infra example, does that essentially give telcos the opportunity to set up a piece of hardware that they're not necessarily on the hook for the CapEx of deploying? They can invite participants to be able to pay towards that and then earn some of the yield that would be created as a result. Is that right?
Yeah, and where we're seeing a lot of traction with that liquid infrastructure is MDUs or multifamily. So if you have an apartment, so let's say you're a landlord, you have a 200 unit complex, you don't maybe want to run an ISP, but you might want to put the capital up, right, to build the fiber optic to the unit, increases value to the unit. You're getting part of the revenue back for the capital, And then because it's fractionalized, the operator's getting some of the capital. Maybe there's other participants in there, someone who's providing middle mile or other connectivity, and you can fractionalize it as small as you'd like to do. But so you're seeing these kind of like you wouldn't necessarily think, okay, a landlord is an ISP, but we're able to really open up that market to a bunch of non-traditional type of network operators and networks that don't look like AT&T necessarily.
Yeah, I love that you're able to bring some of those unique principles that decentralized infra can generate, and then you can create that value exchange in new ways without necessarily requiring them to be like this monolithic type service provider for all of those functions. I think that's really interesting. I have a little bit of affinity to the property management space, so I totally can empathize with how challenging that can be in terms of whether it's actually like routing the fiber, as you alluded to, or just managing that. There's just a lot that can be a part of that value chain, if you will. And you talked about some of the unique components of the Althea network, like micro transactions between machines. Can you share some of those other core key differentiators? You've got liquid infra, you've got the micro transactions between machines. Are there other components too that are really unique or novel that are interesting for people to be aware of?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I think that's really key here. And one is, of course, hardware agnosticism. Because we're not doing a globally accepted proof of some minting of a speculative token, what we're really doing is proving between two machines a payment type of protocol. And everything within a local Althea network is encrypted. So your traffic isn't exposed to your Comcast or your other ISPs as well. That's a key differentiator as well when we talk about freedoms and privacy. But it's hardware agnostic because however we communicate Althea and Althea on the other side, whether that's through a fiber optic cable or for a 5G connection or fixed wireless or whatever, and that's really made us very sustainable in the wake of kind of a crazy last few years in supply chain. And I think even now it's a bit challenging on some of the 5G side. But people are able to build the networks in ways that make sense, whether it's fixed wireless, whether it's 5G, whether it's millimeter wave, whatever makes sense to build a network with, you have all of those tools at your disposal. And then I think the other really exciting thing, of course, we have just a couple of articles that just came out about this too, is really the purpose-built nature of the L1. What you say, oh, why aren't you on Solana or this whatever else other chain? But the way that we think about the microtransaction, utility transactions being prioritized on the Althea chain and the reward systems and incentives for the validators to produce those rewards specifically for the microtransactions over the EVM, I think is very unique to Althea's way of thinking about scaling. So when we think in the future, Althea is going to be the way that all machines communicate and pay each other. What does that scaling process look like? And so instead of thinking about things like this is an L2 because it's good for the token now, we really have that forward direction of creating a bespoke infrastructure for that scale.
Yeah.
So there's 3 articles on the Medium or on our blog you should check out as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. We'll definitely link that for folks to go and read up on because it is an interesting, unique differentiator that I think, especially given as you mentioned, all the supply chain challenges and the fact that there is so much existing infrastructure, how do you coordinate all of that between one shared protocols without necessarily needing to have like net new hardware in the system? I think that's a key component for folks. As you alluded to a little bit ago, one of the developments has been your 4G, 5G core, this Althea mobile push, if you will. Is there some alpha or some information you might be able to share there for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say keep in touch. I mean, the global start access to spectrum is really one of the last kind of key pillars. And then the little bit of alpha I'll share is that we've been working on eSIM and eSIM platform integration. So that's as simple as being able to scan a QR code on your phone and being able to get on the network in a bespoke way, or maybe on a streamlined way, right? And having that single pane of glass between public and private networks. So keep an eye out for that's coming. I would also say we are just starting our pre-sales on what we call our Zombie Apocalypse Readiness Kit. So if you would like to run a 5G network yourself, it's going to be as simple as buying one of these kits, dropping that on the side of your garage or your house, and being able to then run your own kind of home 5G network, home or farm or a shop or whatever. So your phone connects to that, and then you can possibly roam in the future. Keep an eye and keep an eye out for those pre-sales of the Zombie Apocalypse Readiness Kit, so you are then prepared for whatever 2025 has in store for us.
All right. Well, we'll be ready. We'll be prepared. We'll keep an eye out for that as well. There was another, I believe it's pronounced, is it IFI or EFI? Is that, am I pronouncing it right? Butchering it?
You know what? It's definitely Althea's been pioneering it. So maybe Unleashing DePIN will actually pioneer the pronunciation of it. I pronounce it I5, but I think it definitely has a market of its own. And it's this idea like DeFi, where we're looking at how new ways of financing infrastructure. And I think really Althea is a pioneer in the DePIN pay space in terms of how we think about actual real network infrastructure, the tokenizing and the funding, the machine-to-machine billing, all these sort of ways is new ways of thinking about building these kind of aqueduct-like networks. Like, how are we thinking about that? And so I think it needs a new term, right? Beyond DePIN, beyond DeFi is IFI, or infrastructure finance.
I like that. I like I5. That rolls off the tongue pretty nicely. So we'll solidify it here. It's pronounced
All right.
I5.
Good to hear y'all.
That's awesome. One of the other things you talked about briefly was this DePIN Dex. Can you unpack that for us and share a few other details that might be relevant?
Yeah, absolutely. So the DePIN Dex actually really came, and you'll find this a lot in Althea. A lot of the impetus for our development is from customers, or from people that want to utilize the protocol. And so the idea was that certainly there is a lot in DePIN, or this idea of reward-based tokens, whether that's like almost an airline point system, is maybe a AT&T bucks or something like that. So we had people that were running ISPs and or were trying to interact with existing DePIN protocols needed more programmable swapping to USDC. And so the underlying method of currency between the machine-to-machine transactions and Althea's USDC. So it really gave rise to this idea of let's put a seamless integrated DEX into the Althea L1 so that everything can happen seamlessly on chain and have that programmability. And it's very easy. It's an EVM environment. It's a fork of Ambient, so it's very familiar to build different types of tokens there or swap them and have liquidity. So all those kind of familiar pieces, but it's integrated really seamlessly with the machine-to-machine transactions. So if you think about how this is where I really like, instead of a MasterCard or Visa for machines, it's really a Stripe for machines. It really allows merchants, whether that's an ISP or that somebody's managing a bunch of vending machines, or somebody that wants to interact with other DePIN protocols, let's say an XNet or a Helium or something like that, and now have the ability to build in the programmable interfaces on the back end. And Althea is definitely, what do they say at ETH, DevCon in Bangkok, mullet, right? So business in the front and blockchain in the back. And I think we're very much like that as well. These interactions are all seamlessly Web 2, and then blockchain is under the hood.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you have other projects that might be joining the DEX, a timeline of just when we might see additional announcements with respect to that from Althea?
Yeah, we definitely have talked to a lot of different protocols, and we do have a few in mind. Nothing that we have public yet, so definitely keep in touch, and maybe we can chat with you again on Unleashing DePIN and share as those announcements come up. Or if folks are interested in building or interacting with an existing protocol, our Discord's always open. We're happy to chat about how to make that interaction happen.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. We'll definitely have to keep an eye out for any future announcements and maybe do another joint episode when someone joins. That would be great. One of the things I was curious about, a lot of these different DePIN networks, they've got physical infrastructure that extends beyond telecom or wireless connectivity, but they all have this fundamental requirement to be able to connect, whether that's via 5G or some of these other network types that you've alluded to. Do you foresee a future where you'll have further integrations with whether it's maybe like the energy sector within DePIN or just some of these other sectors or verticals that are popping up where there's still a requirement for connectivity and they can leverage your machine-to-machine payments, for example, or your liquid infrastructure, I5, if you will? Are you foreseeing further intersections between those sectors or verticals and Althea as a protocol?
Yeah, 100%. I think energy is just a no-brainer. And then another sort of high demand and where we're seeing a lot of traction is in data center and GPU, that kind of thing. So liquid infrastructure, of course, can provide funding. Let's say you have a speculative token in GPU mining or something like that, right? It's very easy to envision. Althea's liquid infrastructure finances it. It tokenizes that revenue. Maybe you get the speculative GPU mining token, and then it swaps for USDC, and then pays back the initial or that initial streaming revenue comes back in USDC. So what's great about that is that we work with some projects that are, over in Asia or globally. So you are eliminating some of that global friction as money and currency moves around. You're able to move those stable coins as the main exchange of value, even though you might use a speculative token as part of that mining operation. And so we're seeing a lot of, especially as these edge compute, edge data, edge storage are things that are popping up, that there's a lot of one, communication interaction to your point, but two, also just being able to utilize the DePIN DEX and that kind of L1 framework.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of new customer segments that are popping up as they're experiencing growth and coming onto the network. It's interesting. It's almost, you can build almost like a futures market for revenue generated from these networks, which is something that it's quite big.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because that was sort of one of the, like back in 2018 is like, well, you almost can make a predictions market, especially if you think about liquid infrastructure, it's very geographical. It's almost like real estate, right? And you have that on-chain transparency of historical revenues and so forth, in which you can utilize to make good predictions in the future. And so, yeah, I 100% think that will evolve in unique ways. And certainly we are already planning a lending and auction module for the liquid infrastructure as well. So that'll come up in 2025. We should start to have some of those tools that let you utilize your liquid infrastructure tokens.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm definitely want to keep an eye out for that because I think it brings some of the interesting novel aspects to DeFi or even TradFi in some respects, but it actually makes it tangible and realistic for people that have hardware that they're staking or participating in. I think that's a very natural progression for this technology. So what else is next for Althea? You've got your hands full with quite a bit of development. Are there any other alpha points that you're able to share for 2025, things that are on the roadmap that you're excited to see launched or around the corner?
Well, definitely just to kind of recap, we went through the token, the L1 blockchain is finishing up its integration phase and we'll be unlocking and having more usability here very soon as that development gets finished, which is really the culmination of 7 years of work and progress, which is exciting. Liquid infrastructure products like auction module and lending is on the horizon. We have a lot as Althea moves from telecom and mostly broadband into the mobile space even more significantly. We're really excited for that. And we've been primarily US based. So we're also excited, probably you'll see more of a movement toward global operations in the late 2025, 2026 as well. Yeah, I think just an incredible year ahead of us and really just the culmination of a lot of hard work. And we're really excited about what's coming up.
No, I think that's amazing. We'll definitely keep an eye out for it, and it'll be great to see how all that transpires over the next year. There's a lot on the horizon. I started with this. I definitely wanted to make sure I got to prod you a little bit on it because you are a third-generation ham operator. Is there ever a future in which that network interfaces with Althea in any capacity? I know it's been something that runs fairly independently or doesn't really require lots of, I don't know, call it like additional incentives, but is there a future in which you could foresee the ham radio network interfacing with things that you're building at all?
Yeah, so 100%. And I think there's a lot of similarities in that type of ideas around resiliency and sovereignty that propel people to get involved with ham radio that get involved with crypto. And so we are definitely having, when we think about designing the Zombie Apocalypse Readiness Kits, for example, like there's a spot for your ham radio and having that sort of resiliency in there. The key with ham radio, though, what makes it challenging in terms of just pure interaction is it's non-encrypted traffic. So, generally when we think about commercial traffic, when I'm using the internet, when you're using the internet, that needs to be encrypted, sort of end to end across all of that. So that makes it a little bit challenging to put into the day-to-day operations. But I think when we think about things about community sovereignty and resiliency, that's where we add in the addition of ham radio. There's also some interesting things that ham radio does with satellite, which might be a fun thing to kind of piggyback along, and because they typically will send up, there's definitely some payloads that they'll send up in satellite to monitor and so forth, and that can be part of that. And as we move forward, but yeah, we'd love to see kind of ham radio make a resurgence. So just this idea of that you can set up sovereign comms pretty much anywhere, I think is key.
Very cool. Maybe the next generation of ham operators will be built on the Althea protocol, and maybe that'll supersede what exists today. Who knows? I'm not a ham radio expert by any means, but it would be interesting to see that come to fruition. Are there ways that people can get involved over and above just being community members, like within the network itself? What does that look like more tactically speaking?
Yeah, so there's a emerging idea, this idea of chapters, which is like these local groups that interact more meaningfully with their local communities, whether that's on an advocacy level, really moving ahead those ideas of resiliency, sovereignty, and keeping those core freedoms of communication or building access. So even if you're not someone who's maybe going to go out and run an operator or run an ISP network, answer those 3 a.m. calls, there's definitely ways to move ahead these ideas. I think that a lot of us hold dear. A lot of us that's the reason why we're in blockchain, is because we do believe that the power of ownership gives us choice.
Deborah, this has been such a masterclass on everything that you're building. For those that want to stay updated, they want to hear about what's coming down the pike for 2025, where are the best places for folks to go and get that information and stay updated with you?
It's crypto, so Twitter at Althea Network is a great place to stay on top of all of our announcements. But we really would enjoy y'all participating in our Discord group. This is where we work together as a community and discuss everything from updates on the L1 to protocol. And so would really welcome everyone to participate there in our Discord server as well.
Okay, perfect. Like I said, this has been incredible learning about everything that you've been building over the last 7-8 years now. It feels like time's flying and in the Web3 space. And it's amazing to see all the traction, all the progress. So we really appreciate you coming on. We'll definitely link all of those links below, Twitter, Discord, etc., so folks can go participate, learn more, stay updated with what you have coming in 2025, because it sounds like it's going to be a very exciting year from the development front. So with that, we will wrap it up here. Deborah, thank you again for coming on, and we will see everybody on the next one. Take care.
All right. Thanks so much, Tyler.
Bye-bye.